Good morning, good afternoon to all the participants. We're just making sure that everybody's getting in and connected. And I'll be reading out some housekeeping announcements before we start. So please note that we are broadcasting this meeting live and it's also being recorded. The 14 main members of the FWG should please keep their video on at all times if they're able to, and everybody else in the meeting, unless you're speaking, should please turn off your video. And if everybody can keep their microphones muted throughout the meeting, unless you're speaking, that would be very helpful. Thank you. At certain points in the meeting, the FWG co-chairs will open up the floor for discussions and comments. So when that happens, the easiest thing to do is to write your name into the chat so that it's easier for the co-chairs to see who would like to speak. You can also raise your hand, but it's a little bit easier if you do also write your name into the chat. Please look at the LCIPP web pages for all the documents that are being discussed for the members. And we will also be linking them in the chat throughout the meeting. So do keep looking at the chat for all of those links. And there is interpretation like yesterday for this meeting. All you have to do is go to the little icon that looks like a globe at the bottom that says interpretation and select the channel that you would like to listen to. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome and welcome back to FWG4, to this our second day of FWG4. As Tiffany indicated, to the FWG members, if you are able to, please turn on your videos while we are in the meeting. Among other things, this will help me be able to figure out if any of you is raising your hand for an intervention, among other things. As indicated at the end of yesterday's meeting, we will begin today's meeting with a discussion of Activity 5 in the initial 2-year work plan of the LCIPP. Activity 5 focuses on the development of an outreach and dissemination plan and thematic training materials in connection with knowledge. And the two co-leads for this activity are Jane and Joseph. The concept note for this activity is online, and I will kindly ask the secretariat to share the link to the online concept note in our chat so that you may click to it if you wish. Joseph, as one of the co-leads, will give the update on the work done so far in Activity 5. Afterward, I will ask the FWG members to share your reflections and other inputs on the draft outreach and dissemination plan that Joseph will present on, so that Jane and Joseph as co-leads can continue refining the plan after FWG4. On that note, I see Joseph. Hello, Joseph. I turn over the floor to you, and please kindly go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Dear colleagues, I would like to present you our progress we have made jointly with Jane concerning our ODP, Outreach and Dissemination Plan. I would like to present PowerPoint presentation on screen. So far, I see them is disabled. For screen sharing, Tiffany, it's possible to give me the permission?
Hi, Joseph. Wissam is going to make you a host shortly, and then you'll have the button there. If you just give it 1 minute.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So far, I can start, and we'll see the presentation in a short time. But I can start that we have developed our progress plan on the basis of our concept note. We try to really to anchor it to our work plan and to the ideas how to implement a work plan via several tools helping disseminate this information. Okay. It goes. Perfect. Okay. Well, firstly, the structure of the plan. Introduction, what I'm going to skip, and 4, let's say in quotation mark, parts or chapters. Objectives of ODP, target audience, dissemination, outreach activities and tools, monitoring and evaluation. Objectives, the third part. Objectives are based on what we have approved in our concept note. Share results as widely as possible, to be a call for engagement, a tool to identify partners, and an avenue to mobilize local communities and indigenous people platform ambitions throughout UNFCCC. The ODP should reflect and serve the objectives of the work plan to take collective action, to mobilize for stronger and more ambitious climate action by all, including indigenous people and local communities, and to allow for the effective cooperation of all relevant stakeholders. What we expect from the ODP is that it should be flexible. This means in early stages, it helps to present the work plan to increase awareness of it, and in the later stages, it should mobilize and disseminate proposals to relevant stakeholders and policymakers, and promote also certain solutions and standards which would like they will be promoted. Objectives we can group in 2 groups, general objectives and specific objectives. Let's see both of them. The general objectives we can see here on this slide on the left side. Share results as widely as possible, set clear principles underpinning the strategy, producing honest, succinct, credible and cost-effective communications, develop simple messages working in different contexts, clearly identify target audiences and user groups and prioritize them, keep the ODP manageable, build awareness of the work plan among the wide but defined groups of audiences and user groups, and influence specific policies or policymakers. These general objectives are refined and developed in more details to specific objectives, which really help better to disseminate the information, knowledge, and whatever is incorporated in our plan to different stakeholders. We can see this block where the specific objectives are grouped somehow, create awareness and increase the visibility of local communities and indigenous people and platform partners, ensure smooth and effective communication exchange, facilitate and encourage the cooperation of various stakeholders, and enhance work plan's impact by disseminating relevant documents information, identify other possible stakeholders, seek out relevant alignments and opportunities for collaboration with other relevant programs, promote synergies resulting in further new activities, involve policymakers to increase the relevance of work plan's results, ensure the work plan's legacy, heritage, outlining best practice and relevant documentation. These are the objectives, and now what about the audiences, target audiences? The general division is to 2 lines of communication, to, let's say, groups. Internal communication, where our target groups are our group, FWG. This means we ourselves are in the line of communication and dissemination of the activities and knowledge and information, and relevant UNFCCC Secretariat teams. External communication target groups, here we can put the division into 4 target groups. First one, keep informed and satisfied. This means the stakeholders within this group are those we see as very helpful for giving us opinions, insightful opinions, and we would like that they will go to us and help us with our decisions. This could be, for instance, the key national or local policymakers or the authorities. They set up legal, regulatory, and policy framework, strategic framework. Second group called Manage Closely, the critical stakeholders. This means the stakeholders we would like really to work very closely with them, and our communication with them is for us essential. Monitor group. This group is mainly the group we monitor for seeing the impact of our activities, like general public or media. And the fourth group, keep informed and involved. Here within this target group, so we could see especially scientific community, expert panels, or even policymakers, but those who are mainly informed, not directly involved in our decision-making process, or not bringing for us the key decision relevant for strategic policy or legal or regulatory framework. For us, it's crucial to understand that successful audience identification plays a vital role in achieving the intended results of our ODP. And the proposed approach is to identify these groups that would be grouped mainly on the basis of their impact and their interest factors on the actions. We should establish contact with them, this wide range of stakeholders in order to engage them from initial stage of implementation to the later stages, and ensure closely aligned implementation progress.
Joseph,
Yes?
My apologies. The text on the screen is a little bit too small for some of our participants.
Yeah,
if you don't mind, maybe clicking on presentation mode.
Okay, it's better now?
Yes,
okay.
That is better. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Okay, now the activities and tools. We are looking, or we have defined here three key strategies, three main strategies under which we put concrete tools, the proposal for concrete tools. First one is the paper strategy, which is really limited because we are really environmental friendly people, everyone from us. But anyway, we can envisage this mainly for the purposes of scientific papers, press releases, leaflets, posters, art sheets, which could be, for instance, distributed at workshops, or in occasion of key events or achievements, press releases could be created and disseminated. Multimedia strategy, this is very important for us because multimedia strategy should be always multi-channel and multi-dimensional, and they could help us and serve us for dissemination of information, knowledge, and results through online tools, including news portals, web pages, social media platforms, etc. And among them, on the first place, definitely we can see our dedicated web portal, which is for us the main promotional tool, and on the other side also dynamic database for collecting on relevant print media work. After this, we can put as multimedia strategy tool also social media, because social networks are useful tools for establishing continuous interactions with our stakeholders, and they could help us maintain daily interest towards the work plan initiatives and events, and also could be useful for sharing key achievements. And the other tools could be, among the other tools could be also incorporated promotional emails, where information and promotion should be devoted to different stakeholders to inform them about relevant events, and also to provide appealing messages for attracting the attention and interest of the recipients, and also the news, for instance. And the event strategy is strategy oriented to thematic conferences, forum events, thematic training workshops, for instance, local meetings. We can see them also very important, where we can disseminate activities from work plan and their implementation to more local and immediate audience in order to maximize the potential positive effects. Engaging in local events could have potential also not only to promote the work done, but also to engage other possible stakeholders. And also meeting with stakeholders we could give here because our idea is to identify and get in contact several stakeholders either with us or between themselves because of supporting the activities. And the last slide from my presentation is monitoring and evaluation. Always when we are talking about certain system and proper system control, we could look for feedback. For us, this is the feedback line in principle, because the evaluation of dissemination and outreach activities should be based on monitoring, impact measurement, and reporting. Effectiveness of all this process should be monitored regularly because of ensuring our goodwill, to ensuring effective impact assessment, and to ensure the quality of the outreach and dissemination plan and activities. For that purpose, we can look for certain qualitative indicators because they provide important information of the quality of the whole process. And for that purpose, we can use several tools and channels, such as websites or feedback from events, and specifically a specific process we can envisage for implementing to be implemented for guaranteeing that all partners regularly indicate all the dissemination and outreach activities they have carried out. It's in the nutshell and in brief package our document we have developed so far. I don't know if Jane wants to add something to this, but anyway, we are now waiting for your proposal or inputs, and we are ready to continue our work on the document.
Thank you very much, Joseph. I'm not sure if Jane is with us at the moment. She might join us later on. Okay, I don't see her on the list, but she might join us later on. Thank you again for the very comprehensive presentation. Like Tiffany noted, like the secretary noted in the chat, the presentation basically summarizes the main details that are in the concept note for the most part. In the outreach and dissemination plan. And the co-leads will be asked if they can upload the draft outreach and dissemination plan at some point for the fuller details, if they are comfortable doing so. And so at this moment, I would like to open the floor for a general discussion on the draft plan, including feedback from, starting with feedback from the FWG members, and then we'll have an open floor discussion. I see Andrea, please go ahead.
Thank you, and good morning to everybody. Just a couple of points. I think in light of our discussion yesterday, under the slide of general objectives, we should add accessible to that list of honest and transparent, that list that was in the very first point under the general objectives. We did talk about the importance, which could also maybe be mentioned in the multimedia list of strategies of languages, especially, I mean, even just starting with the UN languages, which are the dominant languages for most Indigenous peoples, at least. But I think the word accessible needs to be added. We did talk about that a lot yesterday, and it was also raised quite a bit at the caucus. Also, under events, I think in light of our discussion yesterday, regional and national events should be added to local meetings. And my last point is a general point, is that we've always said that Indigenous peoples are not stakeholders, we're rights holders. So maybe you want to put rights stakeholders dash right holders in your references to that. Those are my comments at this point now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I see Estebancio. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Joe, and good morning to everybody. Probably good evening or afternoon, or I don't know what else you are, guys. First of all, I would like to appreciate and thanks to Joseph and his group for this very comprehensive documents, and I think that is very important and things. And one thing that I would like to, I have three things to highlight here. One thing that I want to do is that I think that yesterday we talked a lot, and I think that I don't know whether we took enough, realizing that everything, most of the thing that the indigenous people issue is interconnected. The activities 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11 always will be interconnected. And this one, I don't think that is capable of that. And I think that that's one thing that I want to say. The second thing what I say is, well, already Andrea is more faster than me with the hand. So she already highlighted about the right holder, the difference between the stakeholder and right holder. But I'm going beyond of this. When we talk about the external communication, I don't know whether why the group didn't identify the indigenous people forum on climate change as external communications. It's one thing that I would like to ask to Joseph and the group. And that's one thing, instead of talking about the right holders and stuff. And I think that that one thing. The second thing that I would like to, the third thing that I would like to, as I say, everything seems interconnected. And I think that it seems, I'm very interested with the document that, with the presentation that I had Joseph about the specific objective, general objective, the monitoring, the evaluation. Then bring to my mind now the importance that one of my constituencies from the Latin American and Caribbean stated yesterday the importance to have a national platform or regional or international. And I remember that one of our colleagues also thinks that this is very important in order to have that kind of effective evaluation or monitoring when the time comes. So that's, I would like to share with my small thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Estebancio. I do have Eli and Rodion with their hands up. I don't recall who was first, so I will go in alphabetical order if that's okay. So Eli, I see you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Yo. And hello, everyone. And thanks, Joseph, for that presentation and for all your work on this, and Jane, of course, as well. I had a maybe question slash comment kind of merged together. So the outreach and dissemination, I think, plan, which for me looks really promising, and it does seem like it would provide a good opportunity for us to have like common messaging for the FWG, and so that we can, as we're sharing the information more broadly. This, I think, one of the key things is that it'll allow us all to have that sort of common messaging. But in terms of the three layers, or the three sort of avenues of exploration you talked about the paper, the multimedia, and the events. And I guess I had a question about the events. And I am wondering from, I guess, from a resource perspective, given all the discussions we had yesterday for the work we need to do on the regional gatherings, the workshops we have to do under activity 4 as well. And so so maybe this is a question also for the Secretariat, like what would be the resource implications of also trying to have an additional layer of events under outreach and dissemination. So that, I guess that's a question. And maybe I missed a part of that because I guess the way I would see it is like, can we use our existing planned events to help do some of this outreach and dissemination so that we're able to kind of still do all the activities we're planning to do within the sort of the resources, or the limited resources that I understand that we have. So that's one question. And also thinking that maybe through through our multimedia and paper strategy, we would probably, I think, achieve a good part of what we're trying to achieve in terms of dissemination. And then maybe we would use existing events to continue that outreach, as opposed to creating more events. But I may have misunderstood that. So seeking some clarity from folks. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Eli. I don't know if maybe Joseph or the Secretariat might have an initial response to Eli at the moment. I see Tiffany, your video is on, but Joseph as well. Maybe I can ask Joseph to start. Thank you.
Okay, thank you also for this question. I would like to clarify that our meaning was concerning these events and various layers of events, was especially the use, not to use or require additional resources for this, but to use existing events or already planned or covered by certain resources for disseminate the information. This means once, for instance, we are going to involve ourselves to various events, we would like to bring with us our knowledge and outcomes from our work plan activities and bring them to these events. It was just mainly to show that the world is really wide with the layers and options for thematic conferences. It was not meant with the special requirements to additional resources. This was mainly to describe the possibilities, the options, the ways to disseminate information, which obviously exist because as we are doing, many of experts and many of right holders or stakeholders are involved to the activities which are promoted via different conferences, for instance, or events, and they could bring with them the information and knowledge obtained on one event during one event to the other one. This was my original idea when creating this channel of communication.
Thanks very much, Joseph. I don't know if Tiffany wanted to add anything. So yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I can also add that Jane and Joseph have also been discussing the event strategy, which is one of the bullets in the document that all the FWG members received. And in that event strategy, they would integrate your comments there on which events would be key, which would be strategic. So the events of the LCIPP work plan, but also they mentioned there are other events. So the FWG is often invited to other external events like Hornivia and things like that. So that strategy would include that.
Thanks very much, Tiffany. Rodion is next, and we are just about out of time for this particular item. So if you do wish to take the floor, please indicate as soon as possible. I did see Andrea, but please let's begin with Rodion. I see you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening from my zone time. And thanks, Joseph and Jane, for the very informative but clear presentation and for your leadership. I have some observation and some practical or technical clarification. It seems we'll have more and more information, papers, documents within all 12 activities. I believe that we have to think very carefully in terms of storage information, in terms of have our library and database. I believe it will be put at our portal. And because this activity is very close to activity 4 with regards to the workshop, and I think maybe we should synchronize or to have some cluster approach in terms of database. It will be so helpful for us, but also for all participants in terms of awareness and inclusiveness. And the second one is more technical with regards to the language, because language is always headache for all indigenous peoples in terms of accessibility. For instance, so far we are having a parallel webinar on the best and first Russian case on the local strategy on adaptation, hosted by some Russian indigenous organizations and scientists. So, and of course, we will be happy to share this a good case with other indigenous peoples in terms of community engagement and in terms of their leadership to develop their own vision on the strategy on adaptation to the climate change based on the traditional knowledge and science technology. So that is my question also to Joseph and maybe to Secretariat, how we would like to provide some language and interpretation support for training materials. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rodion. I know that question, but before Joseph and or the Secretary responds, perhaps we can go to Andrea for a final intervention and then go back to you. So Andrea, please go ahead.
Thank you. I think regarding events, we shouldn't just think of events within the UNFCCC or within other UN bodies. For me, a priority is participating in the events that Indigenous peoples are organizing in our regions and our various countries, and making sure that we take that opportunity to inform. For example, I participate in the National Congress of American Indians, Climate Working Group, there's a National Tribal Leadership Climate Summit where I've presented, the Ochete Sacoan Treaty Nations meetings. Those are places where we can present how this work can interface with the on-the-ground concerns of Indigenous leadership, Indigenous grassroots peoples, tribal leadership, etc. And so I think we need to, but that's up to us as the Indigenous members to reach out and make sure that we're making that kinds of presentations to existing Indigenous peoples events, national, regional, local, tribal, whatever they may be. And I'm wondering if you would like a list of those where we have presented about this work, the LCIPP and the Facilitative Working Group, and what it has to do with our peoples on the ground. If that's something you would want us to send a list of, or how do you want to incorporate that in the event strategy?
Thanks very much, Andrea. And so to conclude, I'll ask Joseph if you would like to have some concluding remarks or responses to the interventions. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I would like to subscribe myself to all the words expressed by Andrea just now, because this is concerning the event strategy, because I really meant events as whole, in principle, all the events where we could bring our knowledge, and that's why we cannot stay only, let's say, closed in UN system, the UNFCCC or the other UN bodies and events linked to them. It's, I guess, also our role to bring our activities everywhere where possible. And concerning the languages, really, I understand the point that for many of indigenous people, it's crucial to have access to the information and to the knowledge via proper languages they can understand and they can use. Concerning the resources for that, I guess this is a little bit out of our possibilities now to reflect with the final decision, but should be taken in consideration. Just concluding, thank you for your comments and proposals. We are going to incorporate them to the revised version, and I guess we can bring this one quite soon to you for other rethinking and potential improvement. Thank you again.
Thanks very much, Joseph. And Tiffany, I see you with your video on. Perhaps you can have some concluding clarifications. Thank you.
Thanks, Yo. I can respond to Rodian's question about translation of different materials. So yesterday in the IPO opening remarks, and also some of the members mentioned the need for materials coming out of the LCIPP work plan, like training materials, to be translated into different languages. Some of the members mentioned the UN languages, that would be the 6 UN languages. And other members also discussed the need to work with NGOs to hopefully get them translated also into other indigenous languages. So we've noted that down. We're looking into it. But if that could also be included in the outreach and dissemination plan as a suggestion by the FWG, then that would make sense if that's coming from the FWG as a request.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. Thank you as well, colleagues, for this very rich, I thought, discussion on the draft. And as Joseph indicated, the co-leads will work to integrate your comments to the extent possible and produce a new draft as soon as possible for everyone's review. Before we move on to the next activity, I will note that there are a series of questions posed in the chat by Panchali in reference to the thematic workshops, which I assume you're referencing activity 4, which is not squarely within the agenda of this meeting, but it's linked to this particular activity, activity 5. Rather than respond to those questions on the floor, I would kindly ask the co-leads for that activity 4 at some point today, if they can, to respond in the chat to some of the questions posed, or if not today, that at some point during the meeting this week. Thank you very much, colleagues. And so on that note, we would like, let us please proceed to the next activity under consideration, which is activity 6. Activity 6 focuses on engagement and input of Indigenous peoples and local communities across the UNFCCC process. The co-leads for this activity are Andrea, Eli, Hindu, Irina, Pasang, and myself. For this particular activity, Irina has kindly agreed to give the update related to a draft set of recommendations that have been produced on the engagement and input of Indigenous peoples and local communities across the UNFCCC process. After Irina gives the update, I will kindly ask the members to continue sharing your comments on the draft set of recommendations We've already had a fruitful exchange of views by email on the initial draft, but this will be another opportunity for all of us to continue that discussion so that a further revised version of the draft can be finalized intersessionally after we conclude FWG 4. You should also be ready, if you wish, to share any recommendations you may have on the guidance document or the toolkit, which we've envisioned as a deliverable to complement the draft recommendations. On that note, I see Irina. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Greetings to everyone, and thank you very much, Joe, for the kind introduction. On behalf of my colleagues, I would like to thank you all, the members of the FWG, for your active engagement in this discussion of this specific activity that has served us to build up this document. Thank you for your comments that have been that have helped us to enrich our work. This is still a work in progress, though. However, I think that this meeting gives us an opportunity to discuss further and go deeper into these subjects and maybe put forward new ideas about this topic. I would like to highlight the highlights that gave us Yusuf yesterday about the importance of the work of this platform that has been first time in the history of UNCCC that the platform of such characteristics have been created, and the opportunity that we have to put and to make the voice of indigenous peoples and local communities be heard in the forum of the climate change. And with this specific idea, this activity gives us a great opportunity to do so, to be more engaged in the processes and to make our voices heard. With this, I would like to start with the objective of this activity. That is to develop a set of recommendations for considerations to the SAFSTA 54 on the engagement and input of indigenous peoples and local communities across the UNFCCC process. We have a set of toolkits that help us to build up in this document, and this is the activity 9, which is mapping of existing policies, actions and communications under the convention with respect to whether and how they incorporate considerations and engagement of indigenous people and local communities. Also, we have activity 7, which is mapping of existing policies and practices for the participation of indigenous peoples and local communities in climate change related bodies and processes under the outside of the convention. We have worked in 4 set of the recommendations in our intersession work. The first one is focused on the rights of indigenous people. The second one is related to the engagement of the FWG. The third one is in the contents of enhancing inside the UNFCCC. The fourth is in the context of enhance the participation in policies, activities, and communications under the conventions, including the NDCs, the NAPs, and other communications. And finally, we believe that it is important to include an introduction in the document, and I will refer to this point at the end of this synthesis of presentation. Let me start with the first set of recommendations. As I told you, the first one is about the rights of indigenous peoples. The FWG recommends to take into account the rights of the indigenous peoples to participate in decision-making matters according to the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And also in the light of the preamble of the Paris Agreement, which I would like to quote. It says, all constituted bodies under the UNFCCC should, in the course of their work, take into account how their work may affect the rights of indigenous peoples and provide opportunities for participation accordingly. And the other one is engagement with indigenous peoples should be grounded in respect for the rights, and participation should be formal, cross-cutting, and consistent. Also, we think that we need to share and exchange, that the sharing and exchange of the knowledge, best practices and experience by the indigenous peoples throughout the UNFCCC process should be carried out based on the rights of free, prior, and informed consent. Also, engagement with indigenous peoples should be based on the recognition that each indigenous people and socio-cultural region is distinct and unique with its own knowledge, system, and protocols for such engagements based on the rights to self-determination. And finally, in this set, we have the engagement with indigenous peoples to knowledge sharing and exchange should recognize that indigenous people's knowledge of ways of knowing are collective, experimental, time-tested, and intergenerational, bringing both what is sometimes termed tangible and intangible cultural heritage, and is thus distinct in many ways from other knowledge systems. In the second set of recommendations, actually just one, is in the context of enhanced engagement with the FWG. We have a new and increased regular and formal engagement between the FWG and other constituent bodies under the convention should be increased, including in the context of the local community.
Irina, apologies, you've gone on mute. Yeah.
Apologize. Did you hear the last sentence?
We missed maybe 2 seconds, 2 or 3 seconds. Yes.
Let me repeat then. So the second one is that a new and increased regular and formal engagement between the FWG and other constituent bodies under the convention should be increased, included in the context of the LCIPP. The third set is in the context of enhanced participation in the UNFCCC process. Here we have the recognition of efforts made by the UN forums of indigenous peoples. It says that we should make a distinction between indigenous people and stakeholders that are different things. So this effort of distinguish these two groups should be made and should be recognized because indigenous peoples have rights inherent right in self, and is about the status of the indigenous people participation under the UNFCCC. Also, we have that it should be recognized that indigenous peoples make over the 6% of the world's population and have distinct points of views and participation, and time allotted to the representatives of the indigenous peoples organization should be increased during the UNFCCC proceedings, including by providing opportunities to the 7 sociocultural regions to voice their distinctive perspectives. We have also...
Irina, my apologies. The translators have kindly asked if you could maybe speak
slower? Okay,
yes.
thank you. Also, we have good. We need to make the good practices that should be recognized, that are identified in submissions, and parties should be encouraged to meaningfully include indigenous peoples as part of their national delegations, as well as build the capacity of Indigenous people to meaningfully participate in the process in general. A similar approach to that under the Convention of the CBD should be explored. Indigenous peoples in the CBD are invited to designate friends of the Bureau based on the seven sociocultural indigenous regions to participate in the meetings of the Bureau and act as a co-chairs of possible contact groups. Also, another very important thing that we have included is the subject of funding for the participation of Indigenous people in the UNFCCC process, that it should be increased. Also, efforts should be continued to foster appropriate participation of local communities in the UNFCCC process, including by allowing the establishment of a formal constituency or constituencies for self-mobilized local communities under the UNFCCC process. In this point, I would like to point out that Andrea have sent us some amendments to specifically this point. I saw it this morning. So she proposed a few words after self-mobilization. She suggests that self-identified, also self-organized and self-defined local communities under the UNFCCC process in a way that does not undermine the current equal balance of a state party and Indigenous people representation and status in the FWG. So this is new. Maybe we can see it in the later in our emails and build up from this. In the fourth set of recommendation, we have that is in the context of enhanced participation in policies, actions, and communications under the conventions, including the NDC, NAPS, and other communications. Inside this set, we have the recommendation of recognizing existing gaps concerning the engagement of local communities and Indigenous peoples in policies, actions, and communications under the conventions, such as the ones I already told. And also parties should increase their engagement with Indigenous peoples and as appropriate with local communities in the development and implementation of these policies. The SAFSTA, we have also another recommendation that says that SAFSTA should engage with the FWG, provide capacity building on ways to strengthen partnership with Indigenous people and appropriate local communities in the development and implementation of national policies in a future LCIPP work plan. In the context of engagement with the climate change related bodies and process outside the UNFCCC, we recognize the important work of participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities undertaken by climate change related bodies and processes outside the UNFCCC, including under the CBD, the FAO, and the United Nations organizations for education and scientific cultural organization, which is on UNESCO. New and increased regular and formal engagement should take place between UNFCCC and should such other bodies and processes in order to facilitate the sharing of best good practices pertaining to the engagement and input of Indigenous peoples and local communities in the work of climate change. These are all the recommendations that we have worked in our document, which is under construction, as I told you. And finally, I would like to mention that we have agreed that it is necessary to work in an introduction to this document. And we have had a suggestion that we need to insert in this preamble something that related to the status of the local communities that are not yet formally built or constituted or recognized under UNFCCC as a body. The preamble can also encourage the formalization of a constituency or constituencies in plural to represent local communities across the UNFCCC process. And such a preambular language will provide the context for recommendations focused on indigenous peoples. It is important in the preambles also to reflect that local communities, in some extent, are needed to be recognized as the mandate as part of the mandate of this work that we are all carrying out. I would like to finish in this point, and also I would like to remember that yesterday we received a suggestion about the introduce or maybe recommend to state parties to build platforms, national platforms, so that I would like to remind this suggestion. I don't remember who did it, but you maybe you recall it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Irina, for that comprehensive presentation. On that very last point, yes, when we had a discussion on activity 2 yesterday, there was a suggestion from one of the participants about the possibility of encouraging the formulation of national platforms to complement the work of LCIPP. And my suggestion was to maybe consider reflecting that sort of recommendation in this set of draft recommendations under activity 6. That's for everyone's consideration. So thank you, Irina, for that comprehensive presentation. As we noted, there's already been a bit of discussion among FWG members by email on the initial circulated draft. And I note that Daly has provided some comments over the last week or so. She incorporated them as track changes in the draft that was circulated. And Andrea, as Irina noted, also sent along some comments earlier today. And so perhaps as we begin, as we open the floor to the FWG members for discussion, perhaps I can turn to Andrea, who had her hand up, to start us off. Andrea, I see you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. I think that Irina, in her comprehensive presentation of the zero draft as it currently stands, noted that this is a very distinct activity because it really is recommendations to the SBSTA on how the SBSTA and the UNFCCC will move forward on these matters rather than activities that we ourselves are carrying out, which makes it unique but also very important and standalone. So I'm glad we're starting to engage and discuss. And regarding the other participants, please keep in note that this is just beginning in discussion, and we have shared some email comments, track changes, etc. But this is, I think, the first time we've, as a body, have had the opportunity to actually discuss it. So I just wanted to point out a couple of things. One is there was an edit, which hopefully is on the online version. In the first list of activities, starting in number 1, most of that was taken from the contributions and participation and presentations by our regional FWG representatives, as well as the Latin America Indigenous Peoples representative, who happens to be the UN Rapporteur on Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and myself providing the framework for the UN Declaration on Rights of Indigenous Peoples relevant to this work. In our climate dialogue activity on November 25th. So I want to thank again the presenters, and hope that I was able to pull some of the recommendations from your presentations. Knowledge systems, when it relates to, in number C, when it relates to Indigenous peoples, various Indigenous peoples and regions, it should say knowledge systems with an S. And the word is experiential rather than experimental on the next number D, describing the unique aspects of Indigenous peoples' knowledge systems. I will just comment at this time on the importance, because this is a recommendation to the SBSTA, in particular with their intent to move forward on the issue of local communities. The importance to me and to our region of the amendments that Irina read out that I was able to send today. But there's one more amendment, and I highlighted it in yellow. In number F, as it stands now in the text, it says establishment of a formal constituency or constituencies for local communities. And it was explained to us before that the formal constituencies, including Indigenous peoples at the UNFCCC, are based on the groups that were identified back in 1992 at the first Earth Summit, the 9 major groups, and that the UNFCCC has incorporated informal constituencies that, as Tiffany pointed out, have a lot of the capacities as the formal groups. Farmers is one. She pointed out faith-based groups, for example, is another one. But the formal constituencies are already established from the 9 major groups way back from 1992. So I just wanted to note that I did make that change in 3F, and it says informal constituency. And again, in addition to self-mobilized, self-identified, self-organized, and self-defined, and that this is a principle that we took that was actually recognized back in COP 23 for the equal status, which for us as Indigenous peoples means equal numbers of participants with states in this process. So whatever way that the local communities end up being incorporated based on these criteria, self-identified, self-organized, self-defined, can't be done in a way that disrupts this fundamental principle that Indigenous peoples, through our caucus and through the FWG members, have maintained for equal number of participants with states, which is part of our recognized equal status in this process. So those are the points that I wanted to make, and thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrea. I do see Hindu and Pasang's hands up. I will start with Hindu. Before that, though, I will note that in the online email conversations that FWG members have had so far on the zero draft, there have also been edits contributed or inputs contributed by Hindu and Pasang, in addition to those from Davey and just recently by Andrea. And so at this point, Hindu, if you are available, yes.
Sure.
Please,
thank you so much, Yo, and hi everyone. Sorry for my camera for today. So thank you, Irina, for a clear and detailed presentations in our behalf all. My comment is about one of the recommendation that we regarding the funding. So it is the recommendation E that we say funding for participation of indigenous peoples in the UNFCCC process should be increased. But in my knowledge, as I said in the comments that I sent, there is no established funding for participation for indigenous peoples within the UNFCCC. Not at all. So we cannot increase it. So I think in these recommendations may be very important maybe to say establishment of funding for indigenous people's participations. And if we see that for the next coming years it's not enough, then we can request for the increasing. So that might be the recommendation to be changed on it. And the second one, it's around what Andrea said also on the establishment of the local communities, the possibility of the establishment on it. So from indigenous peoples, I think perspective, and we say that since the negotiation, I mean, I remember that since COP22, when we started saying we wanted to have the equal status of participation. So it will be important to add one recommendation if there is a representation in the future of the local communities, and then the numbers that will be added by the representative of the state delegate, it have to be the same numbers that can be added from the indigenous peoples. Because those are the principle we have. We cannot be represented in a minority, or we cannot be just like the 7 regions and even the others can increase. It have to be equal statute, and equal statute that can be defined by indigenous people. So this recommendation might be also be added. And my final comment on it, it's around the NDCs and the NAPs. Of course, we it's coming from the activity 9 that we did. So it is during the revisions of the NDCs and NAPs at the local national level that the state might involve indigenous peoples to be there as right holders in order to consider the knowledge of indigenous peoples in the NDCs revisions and the NAPs reduction, or I don't know, regions or establishments. And this will be very important part to see how on this level within the already revised NDCs, if there is any possibilities to consider the decision of having local communities and indigenous peoples platform as one of the umbrella or whatever preambles of all the implementation of the NDCs, because some of them are already revised, so they cannot include it, but it might be good to see how they can consider the LCIPP's principles within the implementation of them on NDCs and NAPs. And then I added also within the UN Rio Convention, we always like forgetting about the UNCCD. And for us, it is very important to have the UNCCD conventions, and then under the UNFCCC, UNCCD is the one who is responsible of land. And there is also a study on land right and land right for indigenous peoples within the UNCCD. So the recommendation might go also to them in addition to other UN agencies that we add in order to work in synergy in this activity. Thank you so much, Yo. And then, of course, so I'm also one of the co-leads, so we can come back on it and edit the activity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Hindu. I think Pasang is next, if you are still with us.
Yeah.
Yes, please go ahead. I see you.
Yeah,
please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Yo. I totally agree with Hindu and Andrea. Especially on the land tenure security part, how important it is for indigenous people, because that's the basis of whole our existence, our knowledge system, our values, and everything, whatever we are speaking on the rights of the indigenous people or the issues and concerns of the knowledge and cultural practices, if there is no land security or land rights, nothing exists for long run. So on the basis of that one, actually, my comments was, I mean, like as a also the co-lead of this paper, I also provided, I highlighted with the inputs on the customary governance and customary institution. The customary institution is just not just an institution, but the customary institution is the basis of whole our knowledge system, our rights issue, our culture, values, all the things that we are talk here, especially three function of the local communities and indigenous people platform is if we want to ensure the knowledge and capacity building and climate change action policy and in line with the indigenous traditional knowledge and governance system, the basis is the customary institution. So I would like to link the customary institution with the importance of having the implication of our work on the national level, and then highlight the recommendation of the enhancement of the national platform. That's the basis where the reflection of our work comes up. Uh, so all this policy, even the NAPS and the NDC and all the policies which has been going on to address the climate change adaptation and mitigations, everything is coming up at the national level. So I believe like the effective participation of indigenous people, the recognition of our land tenure security or our customary governance system will be enhanced if we have the national platform. And then another point I would like to highlight very much, because we believe the mandate of this platform is also to coordinate and communicate effectively inside and outside the bodies, so that our work will be enhanced, because just with the platforms it would not be possible to fulfill effectively to make it effective and to make it more vibrant. It is very important to have our extension with all the bodies, both inside and outside. So we should not hesitate for extending our hands to work with the organization or institution or the bilateral, multilateral agencies who have been working for indigenous people, for our cultural, our issues, our knowledge-based concerns. That is what I would like to add further, and I would be, because we are working on the same paper, so would like to work regularly on this one. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Pasang. I see Majid's hand up. Please go ahead. I see you.
Hello, Yo, and the other colleagues, sisters and brothers, the FWG. Greetings of the day, whatever time zone that you may be staying at the moment. I'd be very brief, and I'd like just to very briefly echo what Hindu said, and further highlight the importance of having the indigenous peoples engaged on the formulation and development of the NDCs and NAPS. But having said so, I know within the mandate of the LCIPP and the FWG, very much in line with what Pasang just touched upon a few minutes ago, the NDCs and the NAPS are, in essence, nationally in nature. So it is nationally determined, these national adaptation plans. What we can do at best is to encourage parties to the UNFCCC and outside of the UNFCCCs in various UN conventions and bodies to encourage and recommend to make use of this enormous and significant amount of knowledge of the indigenous peoples, so that it could best be utilized when it comes to combating climate change. So whilst I supporting what Hindu indicated regarding the engagement of the indigenous people in the NDCs, of course, as we are gradually approaching to the end of the first periodic review of the NDCs 2022, and that would be a good opportunity that in any future COPs, we would be encouraging parties, at least within the UNFCCC, to make use of the experience and the knowledge that exists within their own territory for a better implementation of the, for instance, Paris Agreement. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Majid. And I did see Daly's hand go up. Just noting to colleagues that we're just about out of time, the allocated time for this activity discussion. The next block is a break. So we can maybe continue a little bit of our discussion and conclude as soon as possible. So Daly, I see you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I apologize for my late arrival to the meeting. I was engaged in and made a presentation to the FAO North American and high-level expert seminar on food systems in anticipation of the 2021 Food Systems Summit. And let me thank both Yo and Irina for the work that they've done on the activity and recognizing some of the comments that I've made previously in the incorporation of them, the willingness. And I understand that the document is in draft form and that we'll have additional time. So I think that's really important. The comments made about local communities and the composition of the FWG is a critical issue. I'll yield on that point now. Also, the idea of the national platforms and any efforts to decentralize activities, especially ensuring that that change trickles down to the national and domestic level is absolutely crucial. The main point that I wanted to make right now is, well, the two things that I really do think that we need to consider the perspectives of Indigenous peoples on the UN system and the agencies and bodies and organs and specialized agencies, because there have been areas where there has been extraordinary embrace of the rights of Indigenous peoples. In fact, in my view, the FAO and the session I just now left, that we're pushing to have them turn the corner on Indigenous perspectives to a host of things, including our food systems, Indigenous knowledge, and so forth. So I think that our perspectives in terms of the treatment of Indigenous people's issues and specifically our rights needs to be taken into account in terms of the activity itself, but more significantly, the outcomes or the recommendations that are made in this context. Andrea's comment about recommendations to the substan, my final thing is that I think we need to be very comprehensive about the recommendations that we put forward. And by that, I mean taking into account not only Indigenous people's perspectives, but also their experience with some of the different UN bodies and agencies that were originally referenced in the document. So I just look forward to the opportunity to make further contributions. And again, thank you for the work done by the co-leads.
Thank you very much, Daly. And yes, as you noted, this is still very much in draft form, and we look forward to further discussions among the FWG intersessionally by email to continue refining the document. I would like to conclude very soon, and I did want to give an opportunity to the other participants, the observers, to raise any questions if they wish or make any interventions. There was at one point a hand up from one of the observers who then put the hand down. I think that was Latif. I'm not sure if that person still wants to intervene, but at the moment I do see Andrea's hand up if she would like to make a comment. So please go ahead, Andrea.
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Oh.
Latif, I'm okay.
Okay, thank you very much. In that case, let's go to Andrea.
Okay,
Please.
no, all right, thank you. I just wanted to, since this is the first time we've actually had a chance to talk about the various contributions that other members have made, and in light of some of the things that Daly just mentioned too, under 3D, there's a reference to our recommending that Friends of the Bureau structure in keeping with what the CBD has. And I would like to talk further about that at another opportunity, maybe. I'm not sure which of our FWG members actually contributed that paragraph and what that would actually mean in the context of the UNFCCC, and if that's a structure that Indigenous peoples have found to be workable or beneficial at the CBD. I know CBD right now is undergoing a whole post-2020 framework change, and I haven't really heard that issue be raised in that context. So I just would like to note that I don't really understand or maybe feel a need for further discussion on that specific recommendation based maybe at a future time of the member that recommended that it be included and some of the questions I just asked about it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrea. If the FWG member that contributed that language would like to take the floor now, then please do so. But otherwise, we can keep that under consideration for future discussion. I do recall that it was Eli who contributed that language, and he's raising his hand. So please go ahead, Eli.
Yeah, thanks. And this is, I think, as Andrea said, it's probably a good one that we can discuss further. This was captured in one of our the submissions from our activities. So I think this was under activity 7, which was looking at the various ways Indigenous peoples have been engaged in different forums, and this was one of the ones that was highlighted to us as a good practice. But certainly it would be worth discussing further with perhaps maybe some of our CBD colleagues to get a better understanding of how they feel, or CBD colleagues and obviously Indigenous peoples who are engaged in the CBD discussions, and to give us maybe a better understanding of how it's been working for them.
Thanks very much, Eli, for that clarification. And just in the chat, I note that Benjamin Schechter has indicated OHCHR's willingness to be considered as a partner on the issue of the right to participation as we formulate and finalize activity 6. So thank you very much for that outreach. And Graham did ask if he could ask a question. Yes, please. I think you will be our last intervention before we take a bit of a break. So Graham, if you're with us, please go ahead.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Yo, Anine, and good morning, everyone. It's good to see all of you in this virtual circle, and hope all of your families are as safe and healthy as possible. I guess I have 2 questions, mostly oriented around process, and I'd like to understand more, perhaps from kind of Tiffany or others, what this document in particular looks like over the next year, and at what point do members from the Indigenous Caucus have an opportunity to contribute. I note that many of the facilitative working groups are likely, or facilitative working group members are commenting on a draft. I don't think that's necessarily public yet, so would be interested in understanding that kind of participation. And I think it speaks to what we discussed at the informal session between the FWG and the Indigenous Caucus, and what is that relationship. And then I guess just that kind of, I think, for me, just triggers a more important question, which is like moving forward, recognizing that this is one of the most significant opportunities for Indigenous participation within the UNFCCC, given all the good work, how does that kind of respect the process that we have? So I guess I'm interested in that two-part. Chimigwech.
Thank you very much, Graham. I do see Tiffany's video on if she would like to make a comment. Go ahead, please, Tiffany.
Thanks, Yo, and thanks for the question, Graham. So these recommendations are mandated for consideration at Substa 54, but of course, as you know, the numbers of the Substa is not so relevant anymore because of COVID and because this year a Substa hasn't happened. So the Bureau guidance is that the timelines should still apply, but the number might be different. So what that means is that this version that the members are working on now by email, once they have a draft, that will go online and it'll be considered probably at the next FWG meeting if members agree to that. So the version that goes online will not be a 0 order, but will be a draft 1. And then that's the version that everybody can see online. And then that'll be discussed again and feed into the Substa hopefully next year. It's basically the Substa session that will feed into the review at COP26.
Sorry, Tiffany, just to follow up, the Substa session that will feed into the review, but isn't the review at SB 54 as well, technically?
Yeah. The Substa makes a recommendation to the COP at COP26. It used to be COP27, but now because of COVID, the number of the COP is not so relevant, but the timing of the COP. So the COP that takes place at the end of 2021, which is now called COP26, that's the COP that's going to consider the recommendations by the Substa. So the FWG makes recommendations to the Substa, which we hope will take place in the middle of next year. And then that Substa makes recommendations to the COP that's taking place at the end of next year.
Okay.
Great. Thanks very much, Graham, for those questions, and Tiffany for the clarification. And yes, very much looking forward to contributions and inputs from Indigenous peoples, representatives, and partners in this, what Andrea called a very important aspect of the work of the LCIPP. And so, yes, thank you very much, colleagues, for your patience as we went a little bit over time, but I thought this was a really important discussion to have on this item, on this activity. Before concluding this discussion, please, when we continue as FWG members to share inputs and comments on the 0 draft, please make sure to insert those comments into the version of the draft that was circulated to us as FWG members on December 10th. I think that is the latest one that incorporates all the comments that were received by email, except for the most recent ones by Andrea, which she emailed this morning. But all the other previous ones should be reflected in that version on December 10th. And then we can build on that as a 0 draft going forward. And just before concluding, just noting the comments in the chat from Panchali, as well as Matilda, including in connection with the work under the CBD. Kindly ask the members as well as the Secretariat to make note of and copy those comments going forward. So colleagues, we're about 15 minutes behind time. We were supposed to begin the next agenda item, the next activity discussion at the top of the hour, but I don't anticipate us needing the full hour for a discussion for that activity. And since I'm also one of the co-leads for that activity, I think I'll call a little bit of an audible here and give us a bit of I'll give us a full 15-minute break to take a bit of a break and then resume 15 minutes after the hour. And then Eli and I, as co-leads for Activity 7, will try to make sure that we have a brisk discussion. Thanks very much, colleagues. I'll see you back here in about 15 minutes.
Sai, Siguiente ya.
greetings again to all the participants. I hope everyone had a fruitful break. We are ready to undertake the second part of the second day of our meeting for the fourth official meeting of the Facilitative Working Group under the LCIPP of the UNFCCC. And with that, we're going to begin a discussion of Activity 7, Existing Policies and Practices for Participation under and outside the UNFCCC. This has been an activity that we have discussed in the past, and there have been quite a few inputs on the discussion. The Secretariat, I believe, is going to post the current draft of the Activity 7 concept note. And with that, I would like to ask Eli, one of the co-leads, to present. And I believe that he's going to be turning the floor over to Tom Cameron, who works with him as providing assistance. He's not a member of the Facilitative Working Group or the alternate, just to clarify that. But with that, I'd like to turn over to Eli, who can introduce Tom's presentation, should you so wish. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrea, and hello again, everyone. Small change of plans. I will just introduce the issue and then actually turn it over to our colleague Sebastian from the Center for International Environmental Law, who's the organization working with us on this. So on behalf of myself and Yo as the co-leads on this, as Andrea said, so I won't describe the activity again. We've had a few discussions on this, but it is, as she said, to identify the existing practices, mandates, policies on the participation and also on the respectful engagement of Indigenous peoples and local communities in bodies inside and outside the convention. And so, just to recall, we've basically had a multi-pronged approach on this over the past few months. We had a call for submission to gather input, which I think we had a good number of submissions on that, and we've done some relevant outreach, including, as I mentioned, the Center of International Environmental Law. And for them to help us explore the collaborative partnerships in the implementation of this, like the existing collaborative partnerships on this. And I think we're at the stage where we're reviewing and analyzing the currently what are the relevant bodies and processes under the convention where this is all taking place. So on that, I guess I would just also recall that we did have a good discussion on this at FWG 3, which I forget when that was. I think it was October, perhaps. And we did receive a short summary at the time of the mapping of the submissions that we've received on the good practices for engagement with Indigenous peoples. So since, I guess, obviously we've had a few delays since that time because of the COVID-related challenges, but I think we are still on track to deliver a robust paper for FWG 5. So that's kind of the short update of it, but I would like to turn to our colleague Sebastian from the Center for International Environmental Law to maybe give us a bit of an update on some of their technical work supporting us on this.
Thank you, Elias, and good morning or good afternoon to all. May I suggest that we actually turn to Chad first to provide an update from the Secretariat's point of view, and then I can come with a brief compliment afterwards.
Absolutely, Chad. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Let me just try to turn on the video.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Co-Chair. So, just putting this on the presentation mode. As our co-leads has shared, Activity 7 maps the existing policies and practices for the participation of Indigenous peoples and the local communities in climate change related bodies and processes under and outside of the convention. The initial 2-year work plan of the LCIPP, also as Elias mentioned, a call for submission was sent to get inputs from bodies under, but also outside of the convention. Further to that, we have also, the co-leads has also invited potential partners, and the CL is participating in today's meeting here to collaborate with the implementation of this activity. In response to the call, we have received 10 submissions. 9 organizations responded to the call, and the organizations as shown on the screen. My colleague Abby has prepared and shared an informal background note on the submissions, and the informal note was shared at FWG3, and it is also available on the work plan page, and we will be sure to share that link in the chat afterwards. So since FWG3, we've begun to review and analyze the relevant bodies and the processes under the convention. And here's a slide of the relevant bodies and processes that we're looking at right now. While the review is still preliminary, a preliminary review of the relevant bodies and processes already reveal some of the existing practices, which include but not limited to engage Indigenous peoples and local communities through inter-body collaborative work. A good example of this is the multi-body joint event on the margins of COP25. Second, to designate a focal point, the Warsaw International Mechanism, the committee of Warsaw International Mechanism has designated its one of its members as the LCIPP focal point. And as you all know, that there's also the Indigenous Peoples Organization's focal point. The third practice that we want to share here is to have forums and technical papers which has a thematic focus on the issues related to Indigenous peoples and local communities. And a good example of this is the Standing Committee on Finance 2020 Forum on Finance for Nature-Based Solution has a sub-theme focusing on the knowledge of Indigenous peoples and local knowledge systems for climate adaptation and the mitigation. The fourth, to explore opportunities through the work of the LCIPP to develop training materials that capture and reflect the relevant experiences and best practices of Indigenous peoples and local community. And this is captured in the work plan of the CGE. So where does that leave us now? The plan, as co-lead mentioned earlier, we are on the phase of data compilation and have started to analyze some of the data. The next phase between now and the early next year, we'll be looking at the data along with CL colleagues to summarize the existing mandates, policies, and practices, but also to identify potential collaborative opportunities and the gaps need to be addressed, and to highlight some of the good practices. To successfully do this successfully and also deliver the paper for the consideration by FWG at your next meeting, we would like to invite members to provide further guidance on this important mapping effort, and also to invite all participants to share with us relevant information on existing policies and practices of the participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities, whether that's bodies and processes under the convention or outside of the convention. So with that, I think I'm going to hand the floor to Sebastian, and I'll have your slides up now.
Thank you. So, Chad, would you be sharing on your side, or do you want me to share on my side?
If you have it on your side, please go ahead.
I can do that, yeah. Oops. Participants. No, I will not be able to do that based on the Zoom
Okay,
functionalities.
I will share your slides.
Thank you so much. Perfect. Just providing a very, very brief presentation on the CL's contribution to this work. So the first slide is really to remind everyone of the purpose of activity 7 of the LCIPP work plan, and also to limit a little bit what our contribution will be, and I will come back to that in a minute. But the objectives for activity 7 in a slightly shorter version than the official work plan are to identify and summarize existing mandates, policies, and practices related to the participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities in climate change related bodies and processes under and outside of the convention. And then building on these, the 3 additional objectives are to increase the collaboration between the Facilitative Working Group, the LCIPP, and other climate change related processes, to summarize and identify gaps related to the participation of Indigenous people and local communities, and to identify good practices and make recommendations to increase the respectful engagement of Indigenous peoples and local communities. So when it comes to CL's contribution, our approach would be is working very closely in cooperation with the UNFCCC Secretariat to really contribute to this mapping, building on the approach that we had in relation to those 2 compilations that many of you are familiar with, and I will put the link to those if it is helpful to some of the participants today. But it is really to map, to document the mandates, the policies, the practices, and not to make any particular judgment on the relevance of those. And in particular, I would like to recall this discussion that the members of the Facilitative Working Group had at the previous meeting. Dali in particular emphasized question the notion of a good practice, or suggesting maybe to look at wise practices instead, and questioning also who is legitimate to make these assessments. So clearly what we are going to do here, as very similar to what we did in the previous years with those compilations, is just to map the existing policies and practices so that it can inform the decisions of the discussions of parties, of Indigenous peoples, of local communities representatives, but without making any judgment calls on the value of different policies and practices. If we could go to the next slide. Just the methodology on our side is so complementary to that highlighted by the UNFC Secretariat by Chad in his presentation. The first step is this desk analysis that is very similar to work that we have done in the past and that many of you are familiar with, reviewing all of those references to Indigenous peoples, local communities, traditional knowledge in the work plans, annual reports, report of activities, terms of references and mandates of the 13 constituted bodies, their sub-bodies when they exist, and the 5 thematic work streams that operate under the UN climate agreements. But also, so that should enable us to map effectively those mandates and policies. For us, what's also very important is to try to collect practices, which is explicitly mentioned in the plans for activity 7. So in order to collect practices, we will take a second step starting in January through survey and interviews with Indigenous peoples representatives, support staff at the UNFC Secretariat that work with those individual constituted bodies, the chairing officers that chair those bodies on behalf of parties, but also other experts or stakeholders that can point us towards specific practices that might not be documented written in the annual reports of the different constituted bodies, for instance, but that could serve as a source of inspiration or something that might be a good example of what constituted bodies could increasingly do moving forward. We will stop at just this mapping, this collection of information, And hopefully we hope that this can be a useful basis for consideration by the members of the Facilitative Working Group. But we are very clear, this has been discussed with many of you in the past, but it is not CL's role to make any particular assessment of the value of different modalities or practices. We'll also, for the sake of comparison or to look at some of the important examples from other bodies, we'll try to expand also a little bit with references to a handful of other climate-related international processes, as have been highlighted, for instance, in the submissions that were provided earlier this year in response to the call for submissions by the Secretariat in relation to activity 7. Sorry. And I will stop my presentation here by thanking you all, and also for the trust in inviting CL to contribute to this particular activity.
Thank you, Seb. Eli, do you have any other comments or wrap up before we open the floor?
No, not for myself, unless Yo does want to say anything.
With that, I will open up the floor. First of all, I just want to thank Seb and CL for your work. And in particular, I think you heard already our appreciation for assisting us in compiling the list of international instruments pertaining to the rights of Indigenous peoples, and in some cases, local communities, that is continuing as a basis of discussion, especially at this point, taking it to expand with regional perspectives and experiences. So I really want to thank you for your help on that, to get that document started, and then others, of course, added to it. And I assume you've seen the current draft. I'd like to share it with you, even though with the understanding it is still a draft. We're not, publishing it or anything or posting it. But I think in particular, yeah, I did understand your comment of not, I guess, judging or putting value on the different practices, but more of a mapping exercise. But we are talking about that rights framework in order to assess what very often is called good practices, best practices, wise practices. The question arose at FWG 3, based on what? How are we putting that judgment forth? So all of this will assist us in making those assessments moving forward. So thank you very much for your assistance to the work of this body and this activity. I'd like to open up the floor to members of the Facilitative Working Group to comment on this activity and how we want to take it forward. And then we'll open it up to other participants. Any interest in taking the floor? Rodian, please.
Yes, thanks, Andrea, and thanks, CL, Sebastian, and Elle for a very informative presentation, and chat also, and also for your previous work and great progress. My question is related to some other agencies and platform like IBIS and UNEP, which also generating some strong report assessment, very related to the climate change and Indigenous peoples. So I think the last report done by the UNEP on the emission gap and the last two reports under the IBIS would also be part of our assessment and consideration. So what do you think about, and how we can integrate or invite such strong document to our discussion and to strengthen our comprehensive approach. Thank you.
Rodian, was that a question to Seb or the co-leads, or a
Yes,
comment?
it just open question told, but I would like to ask Sebastian Ciel because of the previous work done, and also invitation to all members, maybe just to have a open discussion.
Thank you. Sebastian, do you want to respond at all? And I think that Eli had to leave early, so we still have Yo as the other co-lead if you want to respond as well.
What I can say is that in order to really be comprehensive, we'll focus most of our attention on the practices within the UNFC constituted bodies to really try to foster this conversation on what has happened in the past, what might be replicated, and just document this across the board without prejudging what bodies might be more relevant or not to indigenous people's traditional knowledge, local communities, but really exploring actually those modalities and practices across all constituted bodies under the climate agreements. To what extent we can, like how many of other bodies outside of the UNFC process we'll be able to include, I'm not sure I can answer that at this stage, but we definitely take a good note of the suggestions now, also comments in the chat previously by Matilda and others. I'll be very happy to come back to some of you to try to see how we can enrich this paper as much as possible, also because some of those bodies, including the ones that were just mentioned, they can be really good source for inspiration to actually push, like to say, invite the participant to the UNFC process to consider what is happening elsewhere and how this can be serving as a source of inspiration.
Thank you. Yo?
Thanks very much, Andrea. And particular thanks to Seb and Seal for your continued engagement on this activity. On that question from Rodian, my understanding is that at this point over the next month or two, the focus under this activity will be on mapping relevant practices and policies on engagement under the convention, and bodies and processes under the convention. But we do hope to expand that to consider bodies and processes outside the convention starting next year, hopefully in the early part of next year. And in that respect, we will definitely look to the relevant policies and practices under bodies such as IPES and UNEP to see if they can be highlighted in the mapping exercise. And of course, if colleagues have specific examples from those other bodies and processes outside the convention that they would like to bring to the attention of the co-leads, please feel free to do so. And please feel free as well to contact your contacts in those other bodies and processes to feed that information to us as they can, so that we can reflect all of that information in an appropriate manner. Thanks.
Thank you. I have Pasang and followed by Hindu.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, okay, maybe I lower. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Andrea, and especially thank you, Chad, and for your excellent presentation, and Sebastian, for your very informative presentation. And also thank you for your support for the Facilitative Working Group, making our work more making our work easier, and supportive information for us to based on to further move ahead with our issues and concerns, especially on the right-based approach, and then protecting the safeguards. So I just have a also to share. I'm not sure whether this is the right time, but since we have been trying to link with the inside and outside the bodies with the policies, but also the initiatives from the different bodies, both inside and outside the constituent bodies of the UNCCC. I would like to highlight and encourage that we FWG to welcome and join hands those constituent bodies, any bodies who've been trying to support our work. So and because this is also a mandate, and this is also very important, that our 12 activities to fulfill the 3 functions will not be enough to ensure our rights, or to ensure our concerns, or to ensure our knowledge system, value systems, and to be replicated our work on the ground. So I would like to in the IPCC now already, because of my own engagement also outside joining the other IPCC authors, and also in the discourse, how valuable, important issues and concerns of indigenous peoples to be reflected in the science bodies. So I would like to draw the attention of our friends, Facilitative Working Group also, that encouraging the organization like ICOMOS, who has been willing to help us to work on the cultural issues and concerns of indigenous peoples that is related with the IPCC, is also very important. That I do not just highlight the ICOMOS, but also other organizations who would like to help indigenous people to promote our issues and concerns. I think we should welcome them, because this is how we can expand our horizons of our knowledge system, expand our wishes, and expand our strategy of enhancing the rights of indigenous people. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a comment on that. On the 4th day, we do have a more in-depth discussion based on our discussion at FWG 3, to talk about how we want to engage, and which one of us wants to engage with which initiative, either that has approached us, which body or activity area that fits within our mandate. And I think that would be a good time to confirm that. I guess, there was some question whether that particular activity was endorsed, but I think that I have a different point of view. I think that if we have interest and it fits within our mandate and working plan as members, that I agree with you. I would say that we should be encouraged to pursue and then bring back that information for the benefit of everyone. But again, that is on the agenda for the 4th day, I think. So we'll take your concern into consideration and make sure that we get back to talking about that on the 4th day, as well as other bodies, the CBD or IFAO, and all of these different areas, if there's an interest and we have the energy and time to do that. On continuing this discussion, I have Hindu and then Daly.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Just to take in the point that you left and Pasang said, I really support what Pasang said on the ECOMAS and the IPCC. This is, I think, the most important part we are really doing. Oh, yeah. I'm seeing Esteban still taking his video, then I'm also not sharing, I'm putting my video. So yeah, it's really very important that to see our work with IPCC and ECOMAS, because this is what we are doing in our region, in our safeguarding of our cultures and knowledge. So that is one part. So as you said, if the discussion is not in this activity 7, so then I will be happy to take it back again in the agenda item that we will discuss on need. So coming to this agenda item 7, thank you so much, Yo, Elias, and Sebastian for the presentation that you did in advancement of the work. Excuse my ignorance, but I'm really a practical person. I wanted to see how it's changed the life of my people, always. That's why when I act in any, international discussions, can be UNFCCC or whatever seat that I'm sitting in another place, I wanted to see how the activities can have impact to my people or how my people can contribute. But when I see the outcome or the delivery of the activity 7, it's all going around the report ending by the technical paper. I do not see like a concrete action or concrete recommendation that can enhance the participation of indigenous peoples, because this is the only thing I'm seeing under the activity 7. So is it any part that you think that can enhance the participation of indigenous peoples at the national level with the other body? Because we are talking inside the UNFCCC and outside. Because when we say outside of the UNFCCC, there are a lot of body that you highlight here, and you who are doing a concrete work on the ground at the national level. So what will be the recommendation, or what will be the demand that this activity 7 can highlight on to enhance the participation of our communities in that place? So I think if we orient this the delivery of these activities in this way, it can be much actionable, because I don't feel that I can sit in a work plan and then the deliberation of the activities cannot fit a concrete action, because otherwise we are not talking about urgency, we are not talking about climate change, we are not talking about really what is matter, and we are also adding to the same system that producing report every day, and I don't want it to be part of production of the report only. And in second thing, so when we talk about the inside the UNFCCC, so may we add into the activity 6, because in activity 6 so far, I think we have the activity 11, activity 9, and activity 4 that take into consideration. So maybe I forget about it if activity 7 is considered. So if it's not, activity 7 might be considered into the activity 6 to make a concrete recommendation, because we already have in participation, but it's have to consider the recommendation on it and making the link, so that can help the technical paper to be much actionable under the UNFCCC. And another part, thank you, Chad, for the presentation of already that there are bodies who are offering a seat to be on the advisory board. Yes, it's good to highlight those bodies who already offer it, like with the Warsaw, like adaptations, adaptation or whatever. So all this body, but it will be also good to see how the other bodies can give us a seat, because so far I know that myself and Grams also involved on it. We are discussing with CTCN, so between younger youth and younger women and gender and indigenous peoples, we wanted to have a seat in this board, and having a seat in this board also can be relevant to what we are already doing, because it is part of the participation, and technology also it's part of how we can collaborate with indigenous peoples. So I have all this bunch of the questions to the colleague there, so I don't know how you can incorporate it, or if you wanted to take a discussions separately with me, but not now, because those meetings are already too much, and it is not our way of work. So maybe after 2 months or 3 months, when we get the break, so we can come back, and maybe if you wanted to have a discussion directly with me, I have some way of seeing the implementation of the activity 7 to be really in an actionable way. Last thing, like in the document that Sebastian proposed, the updating of the one. So this document, we work on it with the Indigenous People Caucus. So I also wonder if this of update might include the Indigenous Peoples Caucus also. It's not going to be limited only to the Facilitative Working Group, because we produced this document together, and we asked at that time Patricia Espinosa to, if she can also do a preface or whatever. So it is the work of the Indigenous Peoples Caucus. If there is any update on it, it cannot be only limited to the Facilitative Working Group members. It has to be open to the Indigenous Peoples Caucus in general, and then we make the update, and then it can be like a shared document between that. So thank you so much. Sorry to be long on this, but it's really a very interesting agenda item.
Thank you. That was quite a few points. I see Yo wants to respond. We have 2 more Facilitative Working Group members who may also have questions. So if we could have Daly and then Estebancio, and then have Yo respond as the co-lead that we have left, or Seb if he wants to, because we're reaching also the end of the time for our meeting, just to make note of that. So we have Daly and we have Estebancio. and then Yo will respond as the co-lead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. I think I just have two comments. I know that this activity, like other activities being discussed in this session, are going to require more time and careful analysis. So I want to make a general comment about all of our activities, but specific to this particular activity is the need to ensure that we do not leave out the human rights framework important to this activity and Indigenous peoples' participation both within and outside of the UN FCCC. I think that without, well, no, maybe in a positive way, this activity in framing Indigenous human rights will be educational to all of the bodies inside and outside of the UN FCCC. And that's why I think it's important for us to really take that into consideration and to be fearless about our recommendations in terms of the right of Indigenous peoples to participate in these processes and to bring forward what it is that we have to offer to all of these processes. And the reason why I raise this is because even though the Inuit Circumpolar Council has had some inroads in terms of the IPCC, especially when they address the issue of oceans and the cryosphere, we're still facing challenges and barriers as to how to offer our knowledge to something that is critical to our day-to-day lives. And the effort to even gain observer status within IPCC, where it seems that Indigenous knowledge and the real potential for co-production of knowledge is quite significant. So I just want to ensure that we don't lose sight of the important human rights framework that has been developed and can be beneficial and also be a positive outcome of all of our activities in terms of educating others, most of whom don't know a thing about the reality of the rights affirmed by state party members and the corresponding obligations. The final thing I want to say is that I think that related to the human rights framework, we have to take into account the self-determination of Indigenous peoples and the opportunities for Indigenous-driven activities. I have some concerns about the ICOMOS proposal. I've shared them in the past. I understand Pasang's point about the benefits, but we have to treat these matters, in my view, very carefully. And I'm more in favor of Indigenous-driven initiatives through and through when it comes to especially our cultural identity and our cultural heritage. So thanks, and sorry to be long-winded.
Thank you. I have a final comment from Estebancio on this activity. And then, oh, I see Pasang's hand up after. And then we'll have Yo comment as the co-lead on where to go from here with this activity based on the input and questions.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. And yes, I'm just going to be very brief since my sister Hindu already says many things, and I think took a few of my minutes. I'm happy to share that. So most of what she expressed, I support, and I have the same concern. The same thing with Daily. I think that most of our regions have that same concerns in different ways about indigenous knowledge. And sometimes we feel that people or the other parties seems to take as insignificant terms or knowledge that we have that could provide benefit for the humanity. Anyway, having said that, I have a specific question to the Sebastian and Joe and Eli in regard of the document in relation to the objectives. The objective 2, when we talk about the identify opportunities for increased collaboration between the Facilitative Working Group, the LCIPP, and other climate change related bodies and processes under and outside the conventions. It is not clear for me, since my understanding is that the Facilitate Working Groups function is only 3 years, only 1 year left. I mean, never gonna work with the Facilitate Working Group with the LCIPP, because supposedly the Facilitate Working Group is, that's the word that make me difficult to pronounce, operationalizing the LCIPP. That's the function that we have. Is when the LCIPP is ready, the Facilitate Working Group will finish the work or the function that they have. So that second objective that you have in the document doesn't make sense for me how you are seeing, because I understand that maybe next year or in next year and a half, because the not normal situation that we have, the disaster need to decide whether the Facilitated Working Group will continue or not continue, or is ready to that we are ready to have the platform to function as platform. So that's my understanding. Apologize if I am wrong or I'm seeing the other way, but the negotiation processes, I still remember that we have talked a lot about it, and yeah, I would like to you guys to explain me this part, the specific part of the second objective that you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Those are some very broad concerns, I think, that are cross-cutting beyond this activity that I think we should set a future time to talk about, you know, the actual future of this body vis-a-vis the LCIPP. I think I referred to some of those concerns when I did my opening as well. Okay, we have Pasang, a brief question, please, or statement, and then we'll turn it back to Yo to respond to the issues that have been raised about this activity and the way forward.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. I would try to be brief. I just would like to highlight one things that you know, the navigation of this existing policy. You know, the navigation of the existing policy is very, very important. Like the help of the Sebastian, the seal, which has been very helpful. It's very important to see the gaps and you know, the gaps where we can fulfill, especially from the perspective of the human rights-based approach. However, as I have been always prioritizing and emphasizing that you know, if the policy remains just on the document without implication on the ground, and the implication of the ground would be possible if we have a you know, systematized establishment of the mechanism of the full and effective participation of indigenous people. So when you review the policy and programs, also it is very important to see, like, is this policy, how is existing at the national level, especially the engagement and the concerning the issues and concerns of the indigenous people, how they have been addressed in the national level and the implication at the local level. I would like to encourage when you to address these things, because just a policy on the documentation without its implication at the ground level will not be really meaningful. Then another part, I really respect the thoughts of what our what Dali mentioned about. I also really encourage that indigenous driven. Definitely, this is the target that we would like to have, because the voice of indigenous people is the indigenous people knows the pain of the issues and concerns than the other people. But however, the level of our capacity is also need to be understood, very understood. especially in the developing country, the capacity of indigenous people still need to be strengthened. And so many people, like some people, because in the context of my country, I have been working very closely with indigenous people. I have been working also very closely with the bilateral agency, also local communities. And people sometimes ask me, why you have to work? Why don't you work on your own? No, because we have to have if you have a capacity, definitely we would work. But sometimes we also need a space and the time for build our capacity, and we need the supportive hands who are supportive to build our capacity to enhance ourselves, to speak out, and dealing with the governments and dealing with the policy and programs is one of the most challenges. And for that one also we need the friendly, indigenous friendly organization who can join hands us to uplift ourselves. And maybe the time comes one day, then we can go ahead we are strong enough to stand on our foot to tackle our issues and concerns. So considering this one that in the context of especially in the developing country, we are still not in that stage that we are stand alone. We maybe stand alone some of the issues, but especially in the policies regarding issues, we still need supportive hands, supportive organization, and supportive the friendly government parties, and even the constituent bodies inside and outside, and we have been working for issues and concerns. I just would like to highlight on this one. As Andrea said, that we'll be discussing more on the fourth day. I'll wait for that one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And remember, we already have affirmed in our draft Activity 6 document, which is still under development, the importance of respecting the differences between various indigenous peoples and various regions, and the right of self-determination for how best to advance our concerns. So with that, I would just like to ask Yo, I know we're a little over time already, but to respond to some of the questions and concerns that have been raised and how they will be incorporated in the next stage of work on this activity. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Andrea. Very much appreciative of the really rich feedback so far from colleagues. I also apologize that we're a little bit over time, since it was basically my fault for taking too much time in the previous discussion, but I really appreciate the feedback so far. I'll try to address the comments raised to the extent that I can at this moment. Starting with Hindu's comments, I very much agree with her. That would be very useful for all of our different activities to produce practical results. And in that connection, I will note that as part of the concept note for Activity 7, there is an objective of making recommendations on mandates, policies, and practices to increase the respectful engagement of indigenous peoples and local communities, not just under the convention, but also outside of the convention. So there's a space there where building on the mapping exercise conducted under Activity 7 to produce recommendations based on the exercise. And I also note that Activity 7 is envisaged to feed into Activity 6, among other activities. And so we'll try to cross-pollinate whatever we come up with in the mapping exercise in Activity 7 to feed into Activity 6 as necessary. Also, the current plan in the concept note is, after getting feedback over the next several months, as well as after conducting the desk exercise by SEAL, among other activities, that we will hopefully post a draft of the technical paper online in the middle of next year, sometime around May or June. At that point, of course, that paper will be open to further comments from different contributors, including the caucus. So please keep an eye out on that progress. I also note in the chat that Seb has responded to one of Hindu's comments or questions pertaining to the previous work that Seb did, or that SEAL did with the caucus. And so please kindly take note of that. Moving to Daly's comments, the significance of reflecting and highlighting the human rights framework in this mapping exercise. I think this is very possible to the extent that the mapping exercise will be able to pick up on approaches to human rights in existing practices and policies under and outside the convention, then this can definitely be reflected. The mapping exercise is, or actually activity 7 is also supposed to identify gaps in bodies and processes under and outside the convention. So to the extent that the activity identifies those gaps, the technical paper will highlight those gaps, as well as make substantive recommendations pertaining to those gaps, and not just for work under the convention, but outside the convention as well. And I do agree with Daly that if we have robust language on rights, for example, in the technical paper, including gaps, then that can be useful as a resource for other bodies and processes to see how they can work on the gaps that we might be able to identify. To Estevancio, very much take your point about the future work of the FWG. At least my understanding is that in the relevant COP decision that finally established the FWG, it does envisage the FWG possibly continuing beyond the current term, of course, subject to the upcoming substantive review. And so because of that possibility of the FWG continuing beyond the current term, that is why we have that particular objective about exploring further collaboration between the FWG and other bodies and processes, potentially beyond the current term. But of course, I cannot predict the future. And so we will see how those discussions go. I think that's it in terms of specific questions to me, as well as the way forward. I'm happy to continue dialoguing with colleagues on this. And I don't know if Seb and or Chad have additional comments to make, but at least for me for now, I think that's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Seb, go ahead.
Thank you. I would just wanted to thank everyone for the feedback. We will make sure also to stay within our own role, not being an Indigenous people's organization or party representatives, but try to foster the discussion as much as we can through the collection of data. And I just wanted also to thank my colleague, Helena Michalke, who is supporting this work and is with us today.
Thank you, and we appreciate your collaboration as well on this, and as I mentioned, on related work of the FWG. With that, we've come to the end of our second day. Very fruitful and interesting discussions, a lot of questions and thoughts being raised that will be important for our future discussions at this meeting and at future meetings. So I think everyone shared very important points, and I do regret that there wasn't more time for input from the attendees, the participants. You know, we had hoped by having a less heavy agenda and packed agenda that there would be more time for discussions. So I would just like us as co-chairs and facilitative working group members to keep that in mind as we move into the next 2 days, that those opportunities for participants' input should try to be preserved. With that, I just would like to say that due to ceremonial obligations that just arose for me relating to the wake and the burial of one of our esteemed elders of our nation, and specific obligations and a role requested from me from the family, I will not be at either most or all of the discussion tomorrow. We have discussed this already among the co-chairs, and my vice chair, esteemed vice chair Jane Alf in the Pacific region, will be sharing the chairmanship for tomorrow's session with Yo. And I thank her for that very much, and for my co-chair's understanding of my need to be elsewhere tomorrow morning, well, all night tonight and tomorrow morning. So with that, I want to thank everybody and thank our translators as well, our interpreters, I guess is the correct word, for enabling us to share this information with each other. And again, thank the Secretariat sincerely for their consistent support of our work in this body. And turn the chairmanship over for tomorrow's meeting to Yo and to Jane, and I'm sure they will do an estimable job. Thank you very much. Chokwe Utesia. Have the rest of your day or night be successful. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, see you tomorrow.
Au revoir.